Imagine, imagine for a second that you are being graded on a massive global scale.
Like a massive report card for the entire world.
Yeah, exactly. A global report card.
Mm-hmm.
And you are a student who has been working incredibly hard. I mean, you've been putting in the hours, taking all the standardized tests, doing the grueling homework night after night.
Right, doing everything you're supposed to do.
Exactly. And the results finally come in. You look up at the global leaderboard, expecting to see your name near the top, and, well, you discover you ranked 89th.
Ouch, 89th is, yeah, that's not great.
No, it's really not. I mean, it's not the absolute bottom of the barrel, but it is far, far from the top.
Yeah.
You are solidly, frustratingly middle of the pack.
Which has to be incredibly demoralizing when you know exactly how much effort you've put in over the years.
Absolutely. You might even be feeling a little disillusioned, but then, right before your eyes, the judges decide to fundamentally change the grading rubric.
Oh, wait, like changing the rules after the test?
Basically, yeah. They get on the loudspeaker and announce that from now on, saving the planet, like your actual environmental footprint, is going to have a major, heavily weighted part of the final grade.
Okay, so a totally new metric.
Right. And the exact moment they apply that new rule to the scoreboard, you watch your name instantly rocket up 32 spots.
Wow, 32 spots, just from that one change.
Just like that. You aren't 89th anymore. You are sitting at rank 57.
That is, I mean, that's a staggering statistical jump. When you look at the data visualization of that shift, it almost looks like an error in the system.
It really does.
It completely alters how you perceive your own success and, more importantly, how the rest of the world perceives your development trajectory.
And here's the thing. We aren't talking about a hypothetical student here. This is the exact real-world reality for Latin America and the Caribbean in the 2023 Human Development Index, or the HDI.
Which is the UN's standard index.
Right. Yes, the standard United Nations Index, the one that has measured global progress for decades. On that standard index, the region ranks 89th globally.
Right.
But when the UN analysts adjust that specific index to account for planetary pressures, creating what they call the PHDI, the region leapfrogs dozens of heavily industrialized countries.
Going from 89th to 57.
Exactly. So today, our mission in this deep dive is to figure out exactly what is going on beneath the surface of that massive jump. We are looking at a huge stack of demographic, economic, and environmental data spanning 3 decades to decode what we are calling Latin America and the Caribbean's progress paradox.
Which, honestly, is absolutely the right framework for this discussion, because data without context is, well, it's just noise.
Totally.
We can look at a spreadsheet of UN rankings all day, but if we don't understand the physical, societal mechanisms behind those numbers, we learn absolutely nothing.
Right. We have to pop the hood.
Exactly. Today's goal is to find the why behind these staggering shifts. We need to answer a fundamental question here. Is this region a genuine global environmental overachiever, intentionally leading the way to a sustainable future, or are they actually just stuck in a massive systemic development trap that just happens to have a low carbon footprint?
That is the ultimate question for us today. Are they an eco-pioneer or an accidental hero?
An accidental hero, yeah, that's a great way to put it.
And to even begin to answer that, to really understand the paradox of these current 2023 rankings, we have to rewind the tape. I mean, we cannot look at a snapshot of today without understanding the motion of the past.
You have to look at the macro trajectory.
Right. We have to go back 33 years to see that macro trajectory. Let's look at the long climb and what we might call the stalled escalator from 1990 to 2023.
Yeah, let's establish a baseline. Because if you look at the standard HDI, which, just for the listener's benefit, is a composite metric measuring expected lifespan, access to education, and general standard of living.
The basic building blocks of a good life.
Exactly. So on that metric, the region has made a massive, undeniable jump. In 1990, the HDI for Latin America and the Caribbean was 0.648.
Okay, 0.648.
But by the time we hit 2023, it had climbed all the way to 0.783.
I want to pause on that 0.783 figure because numbers in a vacuum don't mean much,
Oh, absolutely.
Crossing that specific numerical threshold is actually a huge deal. It transitions the entire region into the UN's high human development tier.
Right, they officially moved up a category.
And that is a monumental generational achievement. Over 3 decades, they have demonstrably mathematically improved the basic foundational conditions of human life for millions of people.
They absolutely have. I mean, the tangible quality of life on average has improved significantly. But, and here's the crucial context, the so what of the situation that complicates this whole narrative.
The plot twist.
The plot twist, yeah. Despite this 33-year climb, despite doing the work and raising their absolute numerical score by a significant margin, the region's relative global competitiveness barely budged an inch.
Wait, really?
Yeah. In 1990, an HDI of 0.648 put them in the top 45.7% of the world. Fast forward to 2023, an HDI of 0.783 put them in the top 43.8% of the world.
Hold on, so over more than 3 decades of constant development, they only gained less than 2 percentage points of ground against the rest of the globe.
That is the harsh reality of the global development landscape, yeah.
It's like running on a treadmill, but a treadmill that is slowly increasing its speed.
That's a perfect analogy.
You are sweating, your heart rate is up, you are burning calories, and you feel like you are sprinting. But the scenery around you isn't changing at all.
You're running as fast as you can just to stay in the exact same middle of the pack position.
Right. Because every other region on Earth is also running on that exact same treadmill. So the question is, why aren't they gaining ground? If they are hitting the high human development tier, why aren't they breaking out and catching up to the global leaders?
To find the culprit there, we have to look deeper into the Human Development Index itself. The HDI is an average of different engines of society.
Right. Health, education, income.
Exactly. When we deconstruct it and look at the individual components, we see two very different conflicting stories playing out simultaneously. The first is the education boom.
Oh, the education data is wild here.
It really is. Over this 33-year period, the expected years of schooling in the region skyrocketed. It went from 11.9 years in 1990 to an incredibly impressive 14.7 years in 2023.
That is nearly a 3-year increase in expected schooling. Think about what that actually means on the ground.
It's transformative.
It is. We are talking about a region that has become highly systematically educated. Entire generations are spending significantly more time in the classroom. They are gaining advanced skills, they are reading more, they are studying more complex subjects.
And that takes massive public investment.
Exactly. You don't get there by accident.
Yeah.
That takes massive public investment in schools, teachers, and infrastructure to keep kids in desks for nearly 15 years.
It is a massive triumph of public policy. The human capital engine is just roaring at full capacity. But then we look at the second engine, the economic engine.
And this is where things get sticky.
Very sticky. Specifically, we look at gross national income, or GNI, per capita. In 1990, the GNI per capita was $12,156.
Okay.
By 2023, after 33 years of a highly educated workforce entering the market, it had only grown to $18,047.
Wait, let me make sure I'm giving the listener the right context here. The research notes that this income is measured in 2021 purchasing power parity dollars, or PPP.
Yes, PPP dollars.
So for the listener who isn't an economist, let's translate that. PPP basically means we are adjusting the money to reflect what it can actually buy at the local grocery store, right?
Yes, exactly.
We are stripping away the illusions of inflation and currency exchange rates to see the real ground-level buying power.
That is a perfect way to summarize it. PPP ensures we are comparing apples to apples in terms of actual living standards. And when you look at those inflation-adjusted, purchasing power-adjusted dollars, the growth from 12,000 to 18,000 over 33 years is incredibly sluggish.
It's barely crawling. So the education numbers go through the roof, hitting nearly 15 years. But the income growth is just dragging. It is lagging painfully behind the intellectual development of the population.
Right. It creates what economists might call a growth fatigue zone.
A growth fatigue zone.
Yeah. The region has successfully built up immense human capital. I mean, they have the brains, the training, and the degrees, but the macroeconomy has not structurally transformed to absorb and reward that capital.
So they have all these highly educated people, but nowhere for them to go.
Exactly. They are producing 21st century minds, but they are plugging them into an economic system that is struggling to evolve past 20th century productivity levels.
That feels like a powder keg, honestly. You are promising an entire generation of students that if they stay in school, if they put in the effort to reach that 14.7 years of expected education, there will be a robust, high-paying economy waiting for them on the other side.
But the data shows it's not there.
Right. The income data shows the economy just isn't growing fast enough to deliver on that fundamental societal promise.
Which forces us to look deeper into the data structure. Because if the economy isn't rewarding the average, highly educated citizen proportionately, where is the value actually going?
Because there is value being created, right?
Oh, definitely. As we established, the overall HDI is technically in the high category. There is absolutely wealth being generated in the region. The GNI did go up, even if it was sluggish. So we have to ask, where is the money?
And this brings us to the dark underbelly of these statistics. If we want to understand why the average citizen feels like they're sprinting on a treadmill going nowhere, we have to look at how the wealth and progress are actually distributed.
The inequality factor.
Exactly. We have to look at the inequality tax.
Yeah.
And the UN data stack has a specific metric to measure this reality, which is the inequality adjusted HDI, or the IHDI.
This is where the data becomes incredibly sobering and where the illusion of the average starts to break down completely.
Break it down for us.
Okay, so when you take that baseline HDI of 0.783, the score that put them in the high development tier, and you adjust it for the actual lived inequalities in health access, education quality, and income distribution across the population, the region's score plummets.
How far does it drop?
It drops all the way down to a dismal 0.619.
Oh, wow. That is a massive downgrade. According to the data, this represents an overall loss of 20.9% in 2023.
Nearly 21% of their human development just wiped out by inequality.
Let's make that tangible. It's like a country building a state-of-the-art, multi-billion-dollar highway system to connect its cities. On paper, the infrastructure is incredible. The road is smooth, it's efficient.
Yeah, you can't get on it.
Right. Because in reality, there is a toll booth at every single exit, and only the wealthiest 5% of the population hold the electronic pass to get through. The infrastructure exists, the progress has been made, but the average person is completely blocked from using it to get ahead.
A full fifth of the region's development is essentially walled off from the general public.
Exactly. Walled off.
That toll booth analogy captures the structural friction perfectly. And when UN analysts break down that 20.9% overall penalty to see what specific inequalities are driving it, they find the main offender very quickly.
Is it healthcare?
No, it's not primarily an inequality in life expectancy, though that definitely exists. And it's not even primarily an inequality in access to basic education. Income inequality alone contributes to 35.27% of this entire developmental penalty.
Wait, 35%? Just from income inequality alone?
Right. Over a third of the drag on human progress in Latin America and the Caribbean is just the sheer gap between the rich and the poor.
That is wild. Income concentration at the very top is functionally acting as a gravitational pull, dragging down the aggregate potential of the entire region.
Yes, that's exactly what the data shows.
So if you are a listener trying to understand the global economy, what does this all mean for you? Why should you care about a 20% statistical loss?
Because the averages are lying to you.
Exactly. It means that if you look at the average wealth in this region, you are looking at a statistical mirage. The fruits of all this development, the economic gains of the past 3 decades that pushed them into the high HDI tier, are being siphoned off by a tiny fraction of the population.
Right.
So if you are doing business there or looking at market potential, you absolutely cannot rely on the macro averages.
It is the systemic reality of what we call stolen development. The region as a whole has fought incredibly hard for its human progress. The everyday people have done the work, they went to the schools, they participated in the economy.
Ran on the treadmill.
Right. But extreme entrenched systemic inequality effectively nullifies a fifth of that hard-won progress for the vast majority. You simply cannot have a sustainable, thriving, innovative society when structural inequality is acting as a massive anchor.
It just drags everything down.
It does. It distorts markets, it limits consumer spending power, and it breeds immense social instability.
It's a heavy, heavy anchor. And what makes this even more fascinating and honestly more frustrating is that this inequality tax isn't just a matter of class warfare or general wealth distribution.
No, it goes deeper than that.
It is deeply structurally embedded in gender dynamics. The data shows that the system doesn't just discriminate based on what neighborhood you were born in. It aggressively discriminates based on gender, even when the qualifications are identical or superior.
Oh, absolutely.
Which leads us into what I honestly think is the most baffling paradox in this entire stack of research.
The gender disconnect. It is, without a doubt, one of the most glaring inefficiencies in the global economic data.
Let's talk about the classroom takeover,
Mhm.
because this is fascinating. Remember how we said the average expected years of schooling for the region was 14.77 years?
Right, the macro average.
If we split that exact same data set by gender, the narrative completely fractures. Right now, the female expected years of schooling is 15.34 years.
Wow, over 15 years.
Over 15 years. It has completely and totally eclipsed the male expected years of schooling, which currently sits down at 14.14 years.
And it is really vital to note that this wasn't always the case. This is a fairly recent historical phenomenon. If you trace the historical data back, the critical crossover point where women actually overtook men happened around 2011.
So about a decade ago.
Roughly, yeah. And since that specific moment, women have been the primary engine driving the educational metrics of the entire region upward. They are staying in school longer, they are pursuing secondary and higher education at significantly greater rates, and they are acquiring more advanced degrees.
They're the academic powerhouse.
Precisely. From a purely capability-building standpoint, women are dominating the intellectual landscape of Latin America and the Caribbean.
Okay, so logically, let's follow the standard economic playbook here.
Yeah.
Women are the educational powerhouse of the region. They are spending over a year longer in the classroom than their male peers.
Right.
You would expect the economic data to reflect that superiority.
Right.
I mean, higher education is globally correlated with higher income, better job security, and upward mobility.
Yeah, that is the standard economic assumption.
But then we turn the page and look at the income reality check. Female gross national income per capita sits at an abysmal $13,702.
And we must compare that directly to the male GNI per capita, which is $22,526.
Hold on. I am struggling to reconcile this math. You just told me women are dominating the schools. They have more training. They have more expected years of skill acquisition.
Yes.
And yet, they're taking home roughly 60% of what men make. How is that mathematically or economically possible? Are major corporations and local businesses actively turning away the most qualified candidates in the region?
Well, they might not be intentionally turning them away at the door, but the structure of the labor market is aggressively failing to integrate them.
Aggressively failing.
Yeah. What is truly fascinating here is the sheer scale of the disconnect between female capabilities and female economic outcomes. The UN data perfectly illustrates this through two very specific competing indexes.
Okay, lay them on us.
First, we have the Gender Development Index, or the GDI. This index measures gender gaps in basic human development achievements, things like foundational health, knowledge acquisition, and basic living standards. The region's GDI is 0.99.
Which is basically a 1.0. For the listener, a 1.0 means perfect, 50-50 equality. So at 0.99, they're essentially at parity.
Exactly right. On paper, in terms of human capabilities, foundational development, and raw potential, there is almost perfect gender equality. Women have all the tools.
Okay.
But then you flip the page and look at the Gender Inequality Index, or the GII. This is a different metric entirely. This looks at reproductive health, empowerment, and crucially, the labor market, specifically labor force participation and income outcomes.
And how do they score there?
On the GII, Latin America and the Caribbean sits at a global rank of 99.
Rank 99.
Yeah.
Just think about the whiplash of those two numbers. You have a GDI of essentially perfect equality and capability, paired with a GII ranking of 99th in the entire world for actual lived inequality and outcomes.
It's a huge disconnect.
It is. The women have the skills, they have the education, they are acing the exams, but they hit an absolute steel-reinforced glass ceiling the exact moment they try to enter and participate equally in the labor market.
Because the market is stubbornly, systemically refusing to value their labor.
Oh, why?
Well, it could be due to a lack of childcare infrastructure keeping women out of full-time roles, or deeply entrenched cultural biases in hiring for leadership positions, or even an overrepresentation of women in vulnerable, informal, low-paying sectors. But the result is exactly the same.
The outcome doesn't change.
Right. There is a systemic failure to convert this incredibly high-potential, highly educated female workforce into macroeconomic productivity and individual wealth.
If you are running a multinational business, or if you are an economist looking at global growth, look at this gender data as a massive cautionary tale.
A huge red flag.
This region is literally leaving billions of dollars of GDP on the table because they refuse to seamlessly integrate their most highly trained demographic into the highest levels of the workforce. It's a masterclass in macroeconomic self-sabotage. You are paying to educate these women and then refusing to let them generate a return on that societal investment.
It is a massive inefficiency. And, it creates a profound societal tension because these women are not simply accepting this economic marginalization.
No, of course not.
While the economic ceiling is proving to be incredibly rigid, the political ceiling has actually been shattering.
Let's dive into that tension. The political power shift. This is really interesting. In 1990, women held just 12.96% of parliamentary seats in the region.
Right, less than 13%.
But by 2023, that number had surged to 34.2%.
That is almost a threefold increase in formal institutional political representation over the measured period. It is a massive shift in who actually holds the legislative levers of power.
It's an incredible juxtaposition. You have this intense, almost tectonic tension building in the society. On one hand, women are gaining significant, undeniable institutional and political power. They are writing the laws. They are dominating the educational institutions. They are clearly the drivers of modernizing thought.
But the economic markets are lagging decades behind.
Stubbornly trapping them in a persistent wage gap where they only make 60 cents on the dollar. It's like society saying, we trust you to make the laws that govern us, and we acknowledge you can ace all the academic exams, but we still aren't going to pay you what your labor is actually worth.
That tension is fundamentally unsustainable in the long run. But it also points to a broader theme in our data stack today. This structural inability to protect, empower, and fairly value vulnerable populations, it extends far beyond the corporate boardroom or the wage gap.
It goes much deeper.
Yes. When we look at the health data, we see that this systemic fragility isn't just about income or career advancement. It is quite literally a matter of life and death.
Because if the economic system is failing to protect and reward these educated women, what happens when they actually need the societal system to survive? What happens when a health crisis hits?
And that brings us to a really difficult part of the data stack.
Yeah, it does. When we look at health, systemic poverty, and what we're calling the COVID cliff, the data becomes incredibly heavy. Let's start by looking at the dual health challenge: maternal mortality and adolescent birth rates.
Right. Historically, Latin America and the Caribbean has struggled with unacceptably high maternal mortality rates and high adolescent birth rates. The data over the last 3 decades shows what we can only really call bittersweet progress.
Bittersweet is the right word. Let's look at the mechanisms of improvement first.
The maternal mortality ratio dropped significantly, from 162.4 deaths per 100,000 live births in 1990 down to 85.4 in 2023.
That number is nearly cut in half.
It is. And the adolescent birth rate also dropped, falling from 89.3 births per 1,000 women ages 15 to 19 down to 51.4.
So on paper, if you were just looking at trend lines on a graph, things are moving in the exact right direction. The curves are going down.
They are moving in the right direction, and that progress is deeply commendable. It is the result of decades of hard work.
Expanding rural clinics, right?
Yes, expanding rural clinics, improving basic prenatal care, and integrating better health education. It represents thousands of real lives saved and real futures preserved. But as analysts, we have to be brutally objective about where those absolute numbers currently sit today. Even at 85.4 deaths from maternal mortality and 51.4 for adolescent births, the absolute numbers remain unacceptably high when you compare them to the developed world.
To put that in perspective, in many highly developed nations, the maternal mortality rate is in the single digits, or maybe the low teens. So 85.4 is still a glaring indicator of a struggling healthcare system.
It is.
And it acts as a heavy anchor on all that female potential we just talked about. I mean, if a society still have a high rate of adolescent pregnancy, over 50 out of every 1,000 teenage girls, it directly and violently disrupts those education numbers we were just celebrating.
It forces them out of the pipeline.
Exactly. It forces young women out of that 15-year educational pipeline and into early motherhood, often trapping them in the informal economy.
Precisely. It reveals that the foundation of public health and societal support in the region is still quite brittle. It can handle everyday operations better than it did in 1990, but it lacks deep systemic resilience.
It can't handle a shock.
Exactly. And nothing in modern history exposed that underlying brittleness more violently and more tragically than the COVID-19 pandemic.
the COVID cliff. I'm not going to lie, this part of the data stack is honestly hard to read. We are calling these the lost years.
For good reason.
Let's look at life expectancy at birth, which is usually a slow, steady metric that takes decades to move. You don't usually see huge jumps in this number.
Right, it's typically very stable.
In 2019, life expectancy in Latin America and the Caribbean was a very robust 75.16 years. It had been climbing steadily year over year for decades. And then the pandemic hit the globe. By 2021, life expectancy in the region had plummeted to 71.76 years.
That is a drop of 3.4 years.
We throw around statistics and decimal points so easily on this deep dive, but I think we need to just stop and hold on that number for a second. 3.4 years across an entire massive global region.
It's unfathomable.
Just think about the sheer volume of empty chairs at dinner tables, the absolute scale of human tragedy required to move a macro-level regional average down by 3.5 years in such a short window. It functionally wiped out 20 years of incremental, hard-fought public health efforts in the blink of an eye.
It is a devastating statistical reality, and it forces us to ask a deeply uncomfortable question. Every single region in the world faced the exact same virus. Every region dealt with lockdowns, hospital shortages, and economic anxiety.
We were all in the same storm.
But the drop in life expectancy in Latin America and the Caribbean was exceptionally, disproportionately catastrophic.
Right.
Why did this specific region break so severely under the pressure?
Right. Why did they fall so much harder than regions with similar HDI scores? What was the mechanism of failure?
The mechanism of failure points directly back to the profound systemic fragility and the inequality we unpacked earlier. When you have a society with highly concentrated wealth at the very top and vast segments of the population operating in the informal economy at the bottom, you have no shock absorbers.
Let's define the informal economy for the listener because it's crucial here. We are talking about street vendors, day laborers, domestic workers, people who work entirely outside the formal tax and regulatory system.
Yes.
They don't have paid sick leave, they don't have health insurance through an employer, and they don't have savings accounts to fall back on.
Exactly. So picture the reality of the pandemic for an informal worker. The government issues a lockdown mandate. But if you are a day laborer, you cannot work from a laptop in your living room.
You can't just hop on a Zoom call.
Right. If you don't leave your house, your family does not eat that day. So, despite the virus, millions of people were forced to wake up, take crowded, poorly ventilated public transit, go to dense urban markets to sell goods, and then return to multi-generational, crowded housing. Quarantine was a luxury they simply could not afford.
It was physically and economically impossible for them to comply with the public health measures that save lives.
And because the government lacked a deep social safety net, they couldn't just wire stimulus checks to people who don't exist in the formal banking system. The poorest citizens were left completely exposed to the virus.
Completely unprotected.
When a global shock hits a system built like that, you don't just see a localized health crisis, you see a sudden cascading failure of society's fragile interconnected systems. The region's development, while categorized as high on the HDI, was built without the deep infrastructural resilience needed to protect its most vulnerable people during a stress test.
And even now, as the region tries to recover from that 3.4-year drop, there is a harsh truth hidden beneath the rebounding averages. Let's look at the metric for multidimensional poverty.
This is a really important metric.
Even with the UN categorizing the region as having high human development overall, the micro-level data shows that 5.6% of the population currently suffers from multidimensional poverty.
And it is vital to note that their poverty has an intensity of 42.4%.
Let's break down what multidimensional actually means on the ground. This isn't just about the classic definition of poverty, like living on less than $2 a day.
Right, it's broader than that.
Multidimensional poverty means this 5.6% of the population is suffering from simultaneous compounded deprivations across multiple facets of life. It means they lack adequate health care at the exact same time that their kids are pulled out of school to work, while they live in a house with a dirt floor and no access to clean drinking water.
It's overlapping crises.
Exactly. They're completely, utterly locked out of the 33 years of progress we've been talking about.
It serves as a stark, undeniable reminder that glowing regional averages can obscure profound local suffering. You can have a highly educated, wealthy urban core in a capital city that pulls the regional HDI numbers up into the high tier, while millions of people in the rural areas or urban slums remain systematically trapped in extreme compounded deprivation.
Okay, let's take a breath and look at the massive picture we've painted of the progress paradox so far.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. We have a region plagued by extreme toll booth-style income inequality. We have a massive gender income gap that aggressively ignores the fact that women are dominating the educational system. And we have severe underlying health fragilities and systemic vulnerabilities that a global pandemic completely ripped open, erasing decades of life expectancy.
It is an incredibly sobering diagnostic landscape. If we stop the analysis right here, the outlook appears exceptionally grim.
But here is the massive plot twist we promised you at the very beginning of this deep dive. The moment the UN changes the grading rubric, the green miracle.
Yes. Let's pivot and look at the region's environmental footprint.
When we look at per capita CO2 emissions for Latin America and the Caribbean, the number is astonishingly, almost unbelievably low. We're looking at just 2.62 tons of CO2 per capita.
To put that 2.62 tons in perspective conceptually, we really need to look at the global leaders. Many countries in the developed world, the wealthy nations sitting at the very top of the traditional Human Development Index, frequently exceed 10 tons of CO2 per capita.
10 tons.
Some highly industrialized nations are significantly higher than that.
So LAC is emitting a tiny fractional amount of the carbon footprint compared to the industrialized powerhouses of North America or Europe. Which brings us right back to our opening analogy. The UN judges deciding to change the grading rubric.
The Planetary Pressures Adjusted HDI, or the PHDI revelation.
Yes. The UN essentially looked at the data and realized that achieving high human development by clear-cutting forests, burning endless coal, and destroying the planet's atmosphere isn't actually a sustainable model of progress.
It's a localized win, but a global loss.
Exactly. So they created the Planetary Pressures Adjusted HDI to penalize countries that are actively harming the globe. When they applied this ecological adjustment to the scores, the penalty for Latin America and the Caribbean is mere 8.68%.
Because fundamentally, their current lifestyle and economic output are not exerting massive, irreversible pressure on the planet's boundaries.
Right, because their carbon footprint is so minimal, their score barely drops. Meanwhile, the heavy polluters of the developed world, the ones with 10 or 15 tons of CO2 per capita, get massively penalized on the PHDI. Their scores absolutely plummet.
Which completely reshuffles the deck.
And this is exactly how the LAC region leapfrogs the competition. When you account for planetary pressures, Latin America and the Caribbean's global rank jumps from 89 all the way up to 57.
It is a total mathematically sound flip of the global narrative.
It's like finding out the guy in your neighborhood who doesn't own a car because he genuinely can't afford to buy gas is actually winning the community's Green Energy Pioneer Award.
That is hilarious.
You look at his empty driveway and go, wow, his carbon footprint is amazing. He walks everywhere. He's so eco-friendly. But if you think about it for more than 5 seconds, you have to wonder about the underlying reason for his sustainable lifestyle.
That car and gas analogy is the perfect lens for this. It brings us to the crux of the entire progress paradox. We have to ask, is this region a genuine pioneer of sustainable development? Are their leaders intentionally charting a new, brilliantly green path for humanity? Or are they simply an accidental hero?
An accidental hero.
Yeah.
That phrase hits hard.
We have to interrogate the data here. Does their incredible low emission rate of 2.62 tons stem from brilliant green innovation? Is it because they have built hyper-advanced renewable energy grids, heavily subsidized electric public transit, and enacted deliberate, costly, sustainable policies?
Probably not.
Or, conversely, does it simply stem from a lack of heavy industrial growth, chronic economic stagnation, and the harsh reality that a large portion of the population simply cannot afford high consumption, high emission lifestyles?
The economic data we explored earlier strongly suggests the latter. Their emissions are low because their economic engine has been struggling in that growth fatigue zone, not because they invented a magical zero-emission engine.
Right.
They're getting A+ in environmentalism, largely because they haven't been able to afford the dirty, carbon-heavy industrialization phase that the rest of the developed world used to get rich over the last century.
Which presents a fascinating yet incredibly precarious reality for the region. On one hand, they have this incredible baseline, They have a highly educated population. They have an increasing level of political gender equality in their parliaments. And they have an exceptionally low carbon footprint.
The raw ingredients are there.
They have all the raw ingredients for a 21st century powerhouse. But on the other hand, they're trapped by these massive structural barriers.
So how do they get out of the trap? How do they break the paradox? Moving from diagnosis to prescription, let's look at the 2030 vision. How does this region break what we are calling the three chains, holding them back from true sustainable prosperity?
Based on synthesizing the entirety of the data stack we've discussed today, there are three primary structural chains keeping Latin America and the Caribbean from truly taking off. If they want to turn their accidental hero status into robust, intentional prosperity, they have to break these chains.
Okay, what is chain number one?
Chain number one is extreme inequality, that 20% overall tax on progress we discussed earlier. A region simply cannot move forward if the economic gains of the working class are constantly siphoned off by a tiny, entrenched elite.
It is mathematically and sociologically impossible to build a thriving, high-consumption middle class when wealth is hoarded that aggressively at the top. The toll booths have to come down.
Chain number two is the labor market mismatch. The region is currently wasting the massive economic potential of its highly educated women.
The 60% income gap.
Exactly. The glass ceiling that keeps female income at 60% of male income is not just a social justice issue. It is a profound, systemic, macroeconomic failure.
You cannot leave half of your smartest, most educated players on the bench and expect to win the global economic game. It's that simple.
And chain number three is systemic vulnerability. The absolute lack of infrastructural resilience that was so tragically exposed by the pandemic.
The 3.4 years lost.
Right. That drop in life expectancy proves beyond a doubt that the societal infrastructure, the informal economy, the lack of safety nets, the overcrowded housing is fundamentally too brittle to withstand the global shocks that we know are coming in the future.
So what is the blueprint? What is the ultimate so what? For you, the listener, looking at how this region shapes its future toward 2030 and beyond, first they have to convert that impressive educational boom into actual productivity.
They have to shatter the economic glass ceiling.
Female education must be seamlessly converted into high-yield economic output. Equal pay for equal work isn't just a nice political slogan here. It is the literal key to unlocking massive, dormant GDP growth.
Secondly, they need to strategically leverage their green miracle. Instead of just accepting low emissions as a byproduct of slow growth, they need to use this incredible 2.62-ton baseline to attract global green capital.
Oh, smart.
The world is desperate for sustainable investment opportunities right now. If LAC can position itself not as a stagnant, struggling economy, but as the premier, ready-made destination for green tech, renewable energy expansion, and sustainable industrialization, they can grow their wealth without ruining their PhDI advantage.
They can transition from being accidental heroes to intentional global pioneers. They can write the playbook on how to get rich without burning the house down. And finally, building public health barriers. They absolutely have to reinforce their public health infrastructure and formalize their social safety nets, so that when the next global shock hits, whether it's another pandemic, a massive climate disaster, or a severe global economic crisis, it doesn't instantly erase 2 decades of human progress in 24 months.
Ultimately, the data shows a region brimming with immense coiled potential. But as any economist will tell you, potential is not destiny. It requires deliberate action to unlock.
It really does. Latin America and the Caribbean shouldn't just settle for being the environmental good student by default, simply because they missed out on the dirty industrial revolution. The region needs to aggressively become the model student for substantive income equality, resilient societal infrastructure, and intentional green economic growth.
It is an incredibly difficult, complex path forward, but the foundational pieces, the educated minds, the low-carbon baseline, the political will, they are already sitting right there on the board.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. It has been an absolute emotional roller coaster of data today. From the incredible, inspiring educational achievements of women to the devastating, sobering impacts of the COVID cliff and the bizarre, fascinating paradox of the environmental rankings.
It is a dense narrative, but an absolutely vital one to understand if you want to grasp where the global economy is heading. And as we close out today's deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a lingering philosophical question to ponder on your own. It's something that builds on everything we've unpacked today about the nature of
I
progress.
love a good lingering thought. Let's hear it.
If Latin America and the Caribbean is currently penalized economically for the very lack of heavy industrialization that makes it environmentally sustainable on the UN's green metrics, does the rest of the developed world need to fundamentally rethink what progress actually looks like? If getting rich means destroying the planet and saving the planet means staying poor, the global system is broken. What if the progress paradox isn't just a localized Latin American problem? What if it is a massive, glaring global blind spot that we are all actively choosing to ignore?